The book is available on
maybe around 380 or 400 BC. When you're looking at a book which talks about the food being the Purna Brahma, which means the embodied spirit of mind, body, and your gut. So, what did we use when we became the modern doctors is we just forgot these issues. A lot of doctors, friends of mine, including myself, and if you really go back and they open a textbook of Davidson, Harrison, there is not a single good chapter there which talks about diet as a medicine. And as an MBBS intern, I was to remember, when you take a history of a patient, there used to be a section called diet, and we used to write balanced diet, and this was like a type before you take the history. So it was such disregard to it. So that's why the Egyptian medicine and our medicine, the Ayurveda, which looked at us as healers, suddenly changed from that aspect of modern medicine where we became curious, where we only talk about giving a pill to reduce the sugar or to create a change in your blood flow. And this thought process of what a modern medicine, it's not the food which is the cause of diabetes. I think we all should take collective blame as doctors. We have not guided our people properly. And guidance of people, what they have to take, sometimes is so vague. And I used to remember as a doctor, as an intern, we used to say, cut down on sugar, that's it, you can eat whatever you want. So then you would probably cut down on 1 spoon of sugar on your coffee and then eat 1 big bowl of biryani every day. And it never came down. So I feel this book and this vision and how we led by example is probably we need more of Dr. Bhujang Shetty in each one of us. I think his spirit has to be with all of us. And every time now, first we were also skeptical when he was doing this, a lot of us now, every time I see something where I can't feel, I tell this person to start taking diet as a serious form. The ourselves have seen the benefits of it, we ourselves see what has happened. Now every word he used to say, it vibrates in your same frequency. Earlier it was not vibrating the same frequency as it should have been. My retina colleagues who see maybe hundreds of diabetic patients a day, I think from today you should have that vibration more tuned to your frequency along with whatever treatment you do. The biggest, this is what I told Dr. Bhujang Shetty 6-7 months before his untimely demise. My friend Dr. Leslie was taking an auto from Vikram Hospital to his hospital and then auto driver asked him that about was this talking about diabetes, and he asked, the driver said from last 22 years now about diabetes ಆಗಿದೆ, overweight ಇದೆ, ಒಬ್ಬರು ಯಾರೊಬ್ಬರು YouTube ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬರು ಭುಜಂಗ್ ಶೆಟ್ಟಿ ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸಿದ್ರು. I saw his video. 16 kg, 16 kgs I have lost, and first time ನಾನು ಅರ್ಧ ಮಾತ್ರೆ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀನಿ. So Leslie called up and told me, see, please tell your father-in-law, the real education is when it reaches the most common person and how he can adopt it. We all talk about different therapies, but if it cannot be understood by a very common man who actually is suffering because of his diabetes, then his entire exercise is lost. So if wherever he is, I will tell him that his education of videos, his powerful messages has reached every section, every class of people. And that is beyond, it's beyond imagination. In the last 5 or 6 years he started, he's reached everywhere. You go to some place in Jharkhand, there will be somebody following this. You go to somebody in Abu Dhabi, there are people following. You go to US, there are people following it. I end my talk with just 3 things. I was happy to just read the present National Geographic has a very beautiful article on food. In fact, we have more articles on food and nutrition in National Geographic and Reader's Digest than our own journals. Our own journals are still have very anarchistic ideas about food and they don't still believe it. What National Geographic says is they did an experiment on a mouse. They created a melanoma, which is a cancer cells in this mouse. And they put this mouse on a very high fiber diet and some of them were put on normal diet. And they started giving chemotherapy or immunotherapy on this. Interestingly, the mouse, the group of them who had a high fiber diet got only 10% of the dose which was necessary to kill the cancer. And the other group of that animal had to get double the dose because they were completely off it. What does fibers do? What does sugar do? It makes your microbiome better. There's not a month goes by with us not having to listen to somebody known to us, a family member who has been diagnosed as cancer. If there is one specialty in India where we need more and more cancer specialists, it's more specialists among the doctors as cancer specialists because that is an area which is desperately needed as a help of people who are having these issues. The second one is every time you reduce processed, all your what Dr. Naren mentioned about those things what we give our children, your liver reduces the CRP protein by 4%. It's a very interesting article. So we as an institute, not only having to release, we are not just releasing the book, I think each one of us should become an ambassadors of food as medicine. That's the first thing. And we have to take the oath that we will also train all the youngsters who are with us to make sure that they take up food as the primary medicine in treating everything you see, whether it's the dry eye, retinopathies and multiple other things. Only then I think this dream and all that vision he had will be fulfilled. He had a lot of unfulfilled dream. He wanted all of us doctors. He used to get every time I would see him upset is when people were not talking about food as a diet, food as medicine. I think today, along with the release of this book, I request all the doctors present here to spread this message and also to practice what you spread. Thank you.
Family members of Dr. Bhujang Shetty, all the eminent doctors, leaders, and all the distinguished guests present this morning. I thought I should begin from where Dr. Bhujang Shetty left off, when he spoke about how much of what we are today we owe to the environment, and how much of what we are today we owe to our genes. And he spoke about that in the context of diabetes. The New York Times today has an article titled Longevity. How much of it do we owe to our environment and how much of it do we owe to our genes? And it begins with the story of a doctor who was treating a patient who was about 80 at the Albert Institute, at the Einstein Institute in the US. And the story says that when he met this fine old lady who was about 80 years old, she was smoking a cigarette. And he said, "Ma'am, can I just request you to discontinue this habit, take this habit off?" And she says that, "Well, I continue to smoke." And she then lived to be somewhat over 100 years of age. And then she said with a chuckle that all the doctors who were treating me had passed away at least a decade before I decided to now become old. But this was obviously an aberration. I had this friend at the Bombay High Court who later on became Chief Justice of India, who was very fond of his pipe. When I will tell him to get rid of this habit, he will tell me that Sir Winston Churchill smoked his pipe until he was very late into his life. I would always remind him that these are really aberrations. Now, the reason why I thought I should mention this is precisely to take off from what take off from what was said by Dr. Bhujang Shetty, both in the video, which he says, namely, that so much of what we are is a product of the environment, and so much of what we are consists of our genes. And as life progresses, the genes perhaps have a greater role to play than the environment in our surviving beyond a certain age, scientific research has demonstrated. But the key of a good and healthy lifestyle today, though I'm not a doctor, I speak from my own readings on science, which I do very religiously. The key to leading a healthy lifestyle is to go back to the basics. There are about 8 factors that all studies have referred to as critical elements in a healthy lifestyle. Good diet, regular exercise, being mobilized, that is to say. So good diet, regular exercise, controlling stress, or managing stress, strong relationships, whether it's with your spouse, your partner, with your colleagues at work, your peers, your friends, curbing, if not altogether, eliminating the use of alcohol, discontinuing completely to on tobacco, controlling sugar, if not eliminating sugar. Now some of these, and of course, not indulging in the use or abuse of opioids. Now if you look at our society today, all these are simple prescriptions, the 8 prescriptions of a healthy lifestyle. But then if you look at society today, you realize that in this quest for an urban lifestyle and the emulation of the affluent, we have perhaps forgotten our roots and moved away from what was traditional knowledge. Dr. Bhujang Shetty was a couple of years behind his age, because I learned that he was around the age of 10 when he entered grade 1 at Baldwin High School. But what you find from his life, and I'm sure all of you will agree with me, that someone who began behind his times, that was because of where he belonged to and where he came from, a small village, for whom access to school education was but an accident, But a person who began way behind his times ended up life as a professional, as a citizen, as a humanist, far ahead of his times. Because what he spoke of was not really conventional knowledge at the time when he spoke about these things. It's now becoming conventional because we realize the value of what we learn from teachings such as those of Dr. Bhujang Shetty. I was particularly amazed by that small photograph of Narayana Nethralaya. He named, of course, Narayana Nethralaya after his uncle. And I was so impressed with that little photograph, those 2 rooms where he began life. And then I said, are we not blessed? We are truly blessed because as a patient of Narayana Nethralaya, and I come here both in my capacity as a tribute to Dr. Bhujang Shetty as the patient. Both my wife and I have been the benefactors of this great institution. What I found is that we are truly blessed because it was because of his vision that this institution was created and grew from that 2-room establishment where he would attend to his patients and his wife would be the receptionist for what we are today, namely a professionally run establishment at the cutting edge of knowledge and technology. But that also reminds us that with the right opportunities, people, there is nothing to stop a young person, irrespective of background or irrespective of origins, from rising to the very top and becoming one of the thought leaders in society. So it's important on an occasion such as this for us to ask ourselves the question, how do we create more and more of Dr. Bhujang Shettys in our society? Because obviously young people are there across India. Many of them have left our shores. But how do we create the conditions for more and more such people to prosper? Prosper not merely in terms of economic wealth, but prosper in terms of creating a platform for them to share their knowledge, their vision, and their aspirations for a better and more humane and a more compassionate society in the future. Apart from the New York Times article that I referred to, I thought I should highlight just two aspects. One, that in a march of our society towards quote-unquote a more developed nation, it is important that we do not forget our roots. So much of what is now conventional knowledge about how best to avoid or treat diabetes, we just have to step back and look at what our grandmothers told us, at least in my generation, or for some of your great-grandmothers. And you would find that there was such a great importance on a basic diet. A diet which was based on millets, a diet which was free of sugar. Of course, we had our days of excess as well. We're all human beings, right? But a diet which was essentially so rooted to the soil. Now, what has happened is that you find that societies and communities, such as particularly those in the hills of Himachal Pradesh, the same you will find in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, societies which were essentially based on millet are moving towards the consumption of rice and the consumption of wheat. For the simple reason that people in those communities believe that if we emulate those on the plains by their devotion to rice or wheat or a high carb diet, perhaps we have the veneer of their affluence. Now what we have to do is to spread awareness that it is our traditional modes of living, of knowledge, of food consumption, of lifestyles, which are critical to our having a balanced life, which is so important for all of us. Alcohol. Our young today who have benefited from prosperity, affluence, and Bangalore is perhaps the capital, the IT capital of the nation, the globe. Alcohol has now become a sign of togetherness, of living together, of enjoying together. And the point of the matter is that how do we then create a society where we warn people of the dangers of alcohol consumption? The Surgeon General of the United States, just a couple of days ago, mooted the idea that as in the case of the consumption of tobacco, there should be mandatory warnings on all alcohol packaging of alcohol being squarely a cause which relates to cancer. I'm not sure when that will see the light of the day, but that's sufficient for all of us to remind ourselves that like sugar, tobacco, alcohol, there are so many of these accretions of modern life which are best avoided. There was a very interesting article by another young researcher which spoke about the importance of breastfeeding. Breastfeeding, which has a significant element of correlationship with our health later on in life, whether it's in terms of diabetes, or cholesterol, or asthma. Now, breastfeeding is not just about encouraging a young woman to breastfeed her child, but also about creating social conditions which do not stigmatize breastfeeding, but encourage breastfeeding. So this is not merely about creating knowledge, but for all of you and all of us together to create social conditions where a certain lifestyle becomes an acceptable lifestyle. Social conditions where we do not empathize with a lifestyle based on alcohol. Social conditions in which we create conditions for young women who would breastfeed their children. In the Supreme Court of India, when I was the Chief Justice of India, we had a small creche which could accommodate about 25 young children. And I said with almost 50% of our 2,500 employees in the court being women today, we need to create a creche, but not just for the women employees, but for the male employees as well, who will bring their children into the creche every day. So we created an expanded facility which can today accommodate about 100 young children, including of young women lawyers, young men lawyers. We created privacy rooms for young women to come and breastfeed their children. Now these are some of the social conditions which we must put into place to create conditions where we encourage recourse to a healthy lifestyle. Talking about diabetes, let me share a personal experience, and I'm not going to be very long because I'm not a doctor. I'm speaking after two very distinguished doctors, so I know the limitations of my own knowledge. But let me tell you about a personal incident. My father-in-law was a very distinguished scientist, had multiple health problems. He had cardiac surgeries, he was diabetic. So when he visited us just before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we took him to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He replaced his pacemaker and we brought him home. And my wife, Kalpana, who is an ardent proponent of a healthy lifestyle, said, look, I'm going to take over your diet now. When he came to us, he was on 30 units of insulin every day. In about 2 months that he lived with us, before the onset of COVID, as I said, his level of insulin had been brought down to 1 unit of insulin without any medication. He thought that there was something terribly wrong with what his daughter was doing. Because as you know, most parents, especially particularly fathers, tend to feel that their daughter is giving him some good advice, or even the son for that matter, then there is something which has to be treated with caution. So he said, I have to go back to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences because this is unbelievable that I'm down to 1 unit of insulin. And Kalpana had actually designed a diet for him where he would never feel deprived. Because the idea was not to make him feel that he was a patient, but the idea was through diet to encourage him to live life to the fullest. There was one little diagram when Dr. Bhujang Shetty was presenting, which said that you can eat to your heart's content, but eat properly and eat correctly. So Kalpana would insist that her father has something every 2 hours to eat. And he would at the end of the day be grumbling, not that he had been deprived, but there was too much which was being given to him to eat. So when he went back to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and they went through the whole routine again with him, they said, we don't know what your daughter has done, Dr. Das, but all that we can say is that she is doing it right. Please follow your daughter rather than the doctors here. So it's all about how we create a lifestyle for us around us. Food, the way we think, the way we internalize stress, the way we engage into relationships around. Therefore, all of this contributes to a holistic lifestyle. Speaking for myself, over the last several years, both Kalpana and I have taken to a vegan lifestyle. Now, vegan lifestyle, I'm no longer in a position where I can issue a writ of mandamus directing all of you to do something. I ceased to have that power after I retired completing the age of 65 in November. But interestingly, leading a vegan lifestyle is not just about doing something which is good to yourself. The essence of veganism is to lead an ethical and a cruelty-free lifestyle. I was asked a very simple question when I turned vegan, but where do you get your protein from if you're not eating fish or if you're not eating meat? And the simple answer to it is that there are several sources of protein which are available even when you lead a completely vegan lifestyle. So veganism is scientifically now documented to reduce cardiac disease, diabetes. It's also attributed to be a cause for reducing inflammation of your internal organs. But above all, veganism postulates a philosophy of live and let live. We are probably one of the few species in nature where we depend for our self-gratification on the destruction of others, including our environment. We are one of those few species which is blessed with a brain with this kind of computing and thinking power which is almost unknown to any other species on the planet, because other species look at life instinctively. We look at life with a thought process which is embedded in our brains. I have therefore adopted, together with Kalpana, and we were led to do so by our two little daughters who are special needs children, into adopting a vegan lifestyle. They are both ethical activists who contributed to our decision. But I wanted to share this with you because ultimately, in the flurry of life, in the stressed lives which all of us lead, and so many of you are here doctors, you have very little time to think about yourself. I think it's important that each of us learns to step back from the conflict. One thing which I realized in my 25 years, nearly 25 years as a judge, first of the Bombay High Court and the Allahabad High Court as Chief Justice, and then of the Supreme Court, and then finally as Chief Justice of India, is that it's important to carve out a space for yourself away from the zone of conflict, away from what you are doing every moment of your lives. It's when you step back that you really reflect. And this movement, which emanates from Dr. Bhujang Shetty's book, is really an effort to step back. Who could have spoken better about diabetes than a person like him who had to depend on 12 pills a day? Who could have been better in a position to convince others about the importance of a healthy lifestyle than a person who himself had suffered a consequence of that, and suffered perhaps involuntarily, not a conscious choice, but because of where he came from. But the true worth of his life, I believe, is that he has given back to the community. He has given back to society. Just as he was creating this center of excellence which is renowned nationally, he was deeply conscious of the need to give back to that very society which was responsible for creating what he created in terms of one of the most excellent centers of eye care in the nation. And therefore there is a multi-layered benefit that you gain from the life of Dr. Bhujang Shetty. First, the excellence which he generated from his own discipline, and what it has been taken to a different level by those who have succeeded him, moving from pure eye care into genetics. That is now something that has been taken over, the mantle has been taken over by the succeeding generations to whom he has passed on the baton of Narayana Nethralaya. So the fundamental layer is of professional excellence. But then the second layer is of the importance for all of us to lead a holistic lifestyle. A holistic lifestyle which values integrated medicine. Somebody who was wedded to medicine, was a surgeon in his own right, looking at the importance of integrating knowledge, the traditional with the modern, the science with cultural learnings which come within our families. So that's the second layer at which you reflect on the life of Dr. Bhujang Shetty. And this integration of medicine, to my mind, is critical if we as a society have to create a society based on wellness in the future. Too very often we live our lives in silos. The allopathic from the traditional. I think living life in silos is not what Indian culture and history teaches us. As I said, we have to only look to the forebears in our own families, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, our grandparents. And they'll really tell you that the essence of their life was to lead an integrated life. So the integration of knowledge, which a book by Dr. Bhujang Shetty brings to fore, is perhaps in keeping with the Indian ethos. So we can yet be modern, and yet we can be rooted to our past and to our present. And it is in this symphony of the past with the present, of the traditional with the modern, that I think a new chapter opens up for all of us, whether we are doctors, whether we are lawyers, whether we are professionals, whether we are homemakers. Because I think we need to create examples of what really lies ahead for the good of our society. Mere emphasis on maybe one aspect of treatment, namely medicine which you ingest, ignores, as Dr. Shetty said, that food indeed is the best medicine. And with that thought then, I will leave you, which is that just as food is the best medicine, we need to combine food with holistic thoughts, attributes of wellness, consciousness and awareness, and a sense of duty, that we create that sense of consciousness and awareness around all of us. Even an auto driver who says that he lost 16 kilos just as a result of watching one video. To get the power of the message, the power of the medium. And it is in that ability to create a society which is governed by wellness, a holistic pattern of life, that I leave you this morning while applauding both Dr. Bhujang Shetty and for what has been taken over from him, both by his two very distinguished members of the family who have been on the stage with me, and blessed to be their patient as well, Dr. Bhujang Shetty and Dr. Narayana Nethralaya.